And once again, welcome to the Carterette series webinars. My name is Tessa Minshew from Georgia Perimeter College, and I serve on the CSW planning team with Sarah Steiner and Buffy Hamilton. And as I mentioned earlier, Sarah and Buffy are 2011 Library Journal Movers and Shakers, and we can't clap enough for that. That's wonderful. Buffy will be here with us later on the day. Sarah's going to be tied up with presenting, so thank you to Karen Viers for helping me with the behind-the-scenes magic. And at the Carterette series webinars, we're very excited to be able to highlight trends in innovation and best practices in Georgia's academic, public, and school libraries. And while the focus of CSW is on highlighting Georgia speakers and programs, the webinars are open to anyone, anywhere, so we want you to bring a friend. Those of you who are viewing with groups, please let us know that in the chat. The Carterette series webinars are sponsored by the Professional and Continuing Education Interest Group of the Georgia Library Association. And if you live in Georgia but you aren't a member, we strongly encourage you to join GLA. Your membership shows much appreciated support for these webinars and for the Georgia library community as a whole. And there's a URL right there to give you a little bit more information about joining GLA. Before I introduce you to Casey and Sarah, I'd like to tell you a few little technical things about Illuminate. Excuse me. For those of you tweeting the sessions, the Twitter hashtag is Carterette, and we'll put that in the chat periodically to remind you of it. The microphone and the whiteboard tools are disabled for participants, so just use the text chat area to ask questions and comment. Moderators will be collecting your questions for the speakers to address at the end of the session, so if you ask a question and the speaker doesn't get to it immediately, don't worry about that. We're going to get those in a Word file and ask them at the end of the session. If you don't hear the audio, try logging out and logging back in. The attendance certificates are now done online, and we're going to show you the URLs at the end of each webinar, and they'll also be emailed to you later on today. And here's a good tip. Remember that the moderators can see your chats, even if they are sent privately, and I'm sure you're all saying lovely things about us, so that won't be a problem. The webinars are being recorded, and they can be found on WebJunction Georgia and on the GLA PACE website. Now we're going to talk about the Illuminate interface just a little bit. The participant window up there near the top left, you'll be able to see all your names, and if anyone is talking, the yellow background behind the microphone will be lit up. Audio is disabled for all the participants, but you, as I mentioned before, can put your questions in the chat feature over there. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, you can raise your hand. That's going to be the little hand with the green arrow above it, kind of underneath the participant window. There's also a little button for applause there, which would be much appreciated, over to the right of the smiley face. Casey and Sarah may be asking some questions to which you can respond yes or no by using the green check mark or the red X that you see underneath the participant window. Okay, so let's get started. I'm very excited to introduce Casey Long and Sarah Steiner to you today. Casey Long is the User Education Librarian at Agnes Scott College and also a Library Journal Mover and Shaker, class of 2009. When she is not at work roping staff and students into writing exciting blog posts or teaching classes, she likes riding around town on her scooter, usually singing loud show tunes whenever no one else is on the road. Sarah is Social Work and Virtual Services Librarian at Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia. She's a tech geek millennial, but she believes that our physical spaces and collections are still vital to our patrons. Her work and research reflect respect for the importance of both human and online services. So take it away, Casey and Sarah.
Thanks, Tessa. Hi everyone, my name is Casey Long, and thanks for coming today. Sarah and I have been involved over the last year in efforts to improve the effectiveness of our blogs and social media. And despite being at radically different institutions in terms of target audience and size of staff, we've found that we employ many of the same planning techniques. So we wanted to share those with you today. These include things like identifying content streams, creating content schedules, developing posting guidelines, and though these techniques may feel like they're restrictive to you, they have not only improved the consistency and quality of our outreach efforts, they've actually lessened the anxiety and workload that we felt associated with maintaining some of these social media platforms, and maybe you have too.
Hi everybody, this is Sarah, and you can actually tell who's speaking, or you should be able to, just in the very bottom left corner where it says audio. It should say audio Sarah Steiner or audio Casey Long. And just to reiterate what Casey said, we hope that by sharing our techniques and experiences that it will ultimately help you maximize the value of your social media platforms. We both believe that while planning and setting direction take time, of course, they can ultimately help you to save time and effort and increase the vitality and usefulness of your social media endeavors. Another problem with plans is that they often end up being prohibitive or inflexible, so we're going to really go out of our ways to advocate for a structured but still fairly loose planning style. And of course, one size doesn't fit all, so we don't mean to imply that our plan is necessarily going to be perfect for you. We're just hoping to get you some ideas, I suppose. So let's go ahead and start with a quick poll, and it would be great if you could answer with the green check mark or the red X. So how many of you have social media services at your library right now? And that can be YouTube streams or Facebook or Twitter or maybe even MySpace. Excellent. So it seems like a lot of people have got them. That's fabulous. Of course, that's probably why you're here. So I'm going to clear these. And the second question, how many of you have some sort of plan with relationship to how you monitor these, how you run them, how frequently you post? Does anybody have a plan? Excellent. So there are quite a few plans also. That's fabulous. All right, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, thank you for clearing that, somebody. So in today's session, we'll be presenting case studies of 2 different libraries. And in addition to that, we're going to be integrating our findings from reviews from library literature and also from the business literature at large, because I think a lot of times we stay in library land, and a lot of times it's really excellent to leave that and go out into the business land. So let me proceed here. Oh, I totally skipped our first slide. There it is. It's beautiful. So today we're going to cover the joys and merits of planning for social media services, and this will be relevant to platforms you're already maintaining or also to new ones that you're thinking of starting. So for those of you who've already got your services rolling, that's great. This will be helpful to you too. We'll also talk about labor division strategies for different sized libraries, which is a really important thing that can be sort of a point of contention. So hopefully that will be useful to you. And we're also going to talk about best practices for setting strategy. And I just want to point out, because I was a little concerned that people might not find this to be what they had in mind when they logged in. We will be touching on social media service maintenance sort of tangentially in a few different points, but it's not the focus of this session. We'll actually be talking more about setting strategy for these things, posting guidelines, and sort of stuff like that.
Yeah, and as we share our experiences, we really want you guys to be sharing your own. Unfortunately, it is difficult to watch the chat box and respond right away, and that can usually derail me pretty quickly because I'll get distracted by something somebody says. But we want you guys to be having a conversation too. We know that some of you have done some strategic plans, and so if something resonates, or even if you don't agree with it, just go ahead and participate in the chat box. And if you want, at the end, that chat box will contain tons of information that we can all glean from. At the top of the screen, you could always click File, Save, and there's a way to save the chat conversation to a text file so you can have that later. So I just wanted you guys to know that we really want you guys to also participate in this dialogue. Even though we may not be responding, we want you to chime in when you can. So to begin our case study, we'd like to give some insight into the types of libraries that we work in and what type of social media we employ. So as Sarah mentioned, Sarah and I come from dramatically different types of libraries. At Agnes Scott, we have 4 librarians and 5 full-time staff members to serve a campus of roughly 100 faculty members and around 1,000 students. Each of the librarians on staff are responsible for multiple areas in the library. For instance, if you know Rita Hardney, then you'll know that she's our cataloger, she's our acquisitions librarian, she's our systems librarian, all rolled into one. And in my role, I'm responsible for social media, outreach, instruction, website maintenance, and reference. So we all do a lot of things. It's a time crunch to add something new onto anybody's plate. Also, our campus is extremely community-oriented, so when we are doing social media outreach, it's important to appeal not only to faculty and students, but to the staff and alumni. So we have a very tight-knit community, and so we try to gear our social media towards them as well. In addition to being a women's college, Agnes Scott primarily serves an undergraduate population, which means that our posts need to grab the attention of a younger audience. And in terms of the types of social media that we're doing here, we've made revisions over time. We initially started off with Twitter, iTunes, Facebook, and blogging. And right now we've consolidated it down to primarily just the blog and Facebook. So I can talk more about that later.
Interestingly, even though we're in a very different environment at Georgia State, we've had sort of a similar path in terms of what we're doing. Of course, Georgia State is much larger in terms of employees and patron base. We have the equivalent of 30,000 full-time students, both graduate and undergraduate, and about 1,100 faculty members. We also have about 100 library employees, which is a lot. Of course, not all of them are involved in social media, but very many of them are. We operate under a subject specialist model, wherein each department on campus has an assigned librarian. So that makes it very easy to target a large number of different departments and degree programs. Many librarians do handle multiple areas, but there's still a lot more diversity. We used to be primarily a commuter school, but now we're coming to have more traditional undergraduate population. A lot of people live on campus. A lot of people are 18 to 22. And sorry, I got distracted by the chat. I can't even look over there. So in the past, we've tried really hard to maintain a lot of different social media platforms, and we've had for many, many years, we've had our blog system, which was fairly famous before I came here in 2004, 2005. We also have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter feed, and we have a YouTube channel that we haven't been using a tremendous amount lately, although I did make an attempt a few years ago to start and work on a video campaign with a few other people here at this library. But right now, we've decided that our focus is actually on our blog, and we're branching out a little bit more now into our Facebook and our Twitter. But we really took some time off to establish the blog in 2009 and 2010, and during that period, we didn't worry too much about our Facebook and Twitter pages.
So hopefully by telling you a little bit about our libraries, you can see that we are really different. If you're a small library, then maybe the experience that I've had will appeal to you. If you're a larger library, you'll see some of the broader possibilities that you can have with a larger staff. So we just want you guys to know that it's possible to do this despite the size of staff, despite the audience, and we just really hope that you will feel inspired. So in both of these settings, we found that without a plan, our social media activities were not as powerful as they could be. We were blogging and tweeting and posting aimlessly to a phantom audience, but we didn't really know who found us or what prompted those who did to continue engaging in the conversation we were trying to have with them. I don't know if any of you felt that way, but sometimes you put something out there and you just don't feel like anybody's coming back. Plus, since we couldn't describe the purpose of these tools because we started off without a real plan, we just wanted to have a presence out there. We knew that that's what you're supposed to be doing. Everybody's blogging and tweeting, so this is the way to connect. But since we didn't have a plan, we didn't necessarily know how to measure our success, and we didn't know how to describe to others what was the purpose of these tools and how to identify who we were actually reaching. So it makes it easy for others to dismiss the importance of this to your organization. I don't know if you guys have had that same experience, but if you can't explain to you what the purpose is, who you're reaching, then it's easy to say, well, you know, nobody's paid attention to our blog or to our Facebook page, so why are we wasting time on this? So we really feel like it's really important to have a plan and to outline what you think is going to be a measure of success. And so Sarah's going to start by giving you a brief overview about what prompted her organization to start a more, to revise their planning process and look at their blog and decide how it should be changed. Then after that, I'll share some insights into the process that we went through at Agnes Scott, and so that you guys can have some background on how we got started.
Okay, so I'm disappointed that this slide came out so blurry, everybody, and I do apologize for that. It looked better on my screen. But at Georgia State, what happened was we were doing a website redesign in 2009, right, Cliff? It was 2009. And in spite of the fact that we used to have a really robust blog system, like I mentioned, it had come to the point where very few people knew about it, and we had a number of subject-specific blogs that were really fabulous. So one on political science, one on policy, one on psychology, and each librarian would set the plan and strategy for his or her blogs. But over time, those librarians left or moved into other departments, and eventually they stopped blogging, and it had reached the point where we still had some traffic in terms of producing content, but very little, and it was all very unplanned and sort of fragmented. And just like Casey said, it had come to the point where librarians we didn't see students coming to the blog, but the students were coming to the blog because there was no content. So we had reached the point where we were very concerned that this was not an appropriate outreach method for us to use at all, when in reality the problem was that our strategy had sort of lapsed. So I just wanted to show you here on the on this slide here. Over on the left is the library's homepage, and you'll see here, I have my little selector tool, that here on the left-hand side is actually our blog. So it's front and center on the homepage, and it has become very, very popular since we started posting stuff here. And you'll also see on the right-hand side that there's this little advertisement for Twitter, and here sort of underneath it is our Facebook. And the blog content feeds directly into the Facebook, and it also feeds directly into Twitter. And in the future, we're going to be generating more content unique to both of these platforms. But at the moment, and when we first started, we just started feeding stuff out. I do realize that's not a best practice, but it's one of those things that sort of falls into the category in my mind of you have to start somewhere, and then you can always expand. You have to pilot test things and see how they go before you probably want to put a lot of effort into them. And this Twitter thing over on the sidebar here actually rotates with our Facebook fan page. So that changes depending on when you visit the site. So if you go, you might see something slightly different. So this is just a quick chart of the number of blog posts we had, and this is a little bit cryptic, and I apologize. This axis here, the x-axis on the bottom, is actually the number of blog posts, and you'll see that in January of 06, we had 9 posts. January of 07, we had 12 posts. January of 08, I've got my numbers all wrong, we had 9 again. In 09 is when we actually implemented the goal that everybody was going to be doing blogging, and it really exploded here in terms of how much we were producing. So in 09 we had 21 posts in that month, and then in 10-18, which was still a fairly significant increase. And then this year in February we actually had 29 blog posts. These are all produced by librarians here and staff members here inside the library. So you can see that we've made a really significant impact in terms of how much we're producing. And this is directly attributable to the fact that we set a policy and we set some guidelines and we set some standards for how much everybody was going to be posting. And just to show you proof that this is actually effective, we didn't start doing Google Analytics until fairly later. And this is something that we're also going to advocate for a little bit later, is actually embedding assessment techniques. Google Analytics is a really easy way to do it, especially if you have a blog. Of course, if you're using Facebook, then you can use the sort of embedded Facebook Analytics, and it talks to you about impressions and whatnot. And it's my understanding that Twitter is also working on some sort of analytics, although I meant to check if it had actually been released yet. I don't think it has, but if it hasn't, then Twitter is going to be having analytics soon in the immediate future. So you will be able to, Karen's posting, thank you. So you will be able to do that in terms of Twitter also. But here you'll see this is the Google Analytics from August 2009 to January 4th, 2011. And we did institute the mandatory blogging goal back in the beginning of 2009. So you'll see our traffic is fairly steady up through the summer. So when you get to May and the summer months here, this is actually about the time when we posted that blog on the homepage, and then you'll see that our traffic has just gone up and up and up. You can see that upward trend, and we did have sort of a blip here in November where the library was closed for a while, and I also think we had some problems with our Google Analytics during that period. But on the whole, overall, I believe our blog traffic has gone up at this point 500%. So it's been a really significant increase, and that's just to me really striking evidence of the importance of doing all these things.
At Agnes Scott, the story is kind of similar. We started social networking in 2008, and from what I can tell, because this is before my time, we started Twitter, we had the iTunes account, we had the blog, and we had Facebook, and these were all set up by my predecessor, Leslie Matthews, who, if you know who Leslie Matthews is, she's a really fabulous librarian who is able to do these types of things seamlessly. It's just part of her nature. She's really great at creating content and communicating with people through these methods. She was the primary person in charge, and she invited other people to participate, but pretty much it was mainly just Leslie and the director of our library, Liz Bagley, who were the authors of most of the content that was posted. And according to Liz, they really didn't have a plan about what to post and when. It typically was just if there was something worthwhile that seemed to pop up. So you can see this is a picture of our homepage. It's actually, this was all revised by Leslie, so this is kind of post-Leslie, pre-me. But you can see here on the homepage that at the very bottom that we have Facebook, iTunes, and the blog, and there's that's the way that you would access these social networking tools. If you'd Facebook fanned us, then yeah, you get this feed, but otherwise you had to click on one of these links to get to it. So you can see that on the library homepage itself, there wasn't a direct feed. We had to drive people to this, and so I guess what I'm saying is that these weren't our primary modes of trying to communicate. We still relied on this area in the middle here. Let's see if I can highlight it. This area right here where it says tell us how we're doing and celebrate the 2010 ASC Writers Fest. This is an area that we would change using just HTML code. This is a static place where we'd update news and events. And so each time that we wanted to switch it out, we had to go into the code and change it that way. So it wasn't dynamically generated. And essentially, the main strategy that we were going with at that time, which is what a lot of organizations do, is just that social media was in the hands of a few people who posted when they could. And for me, while this worked temporarily for people who are really good at blogging and keeping that interaction with people who understand and feel really comfortable in this medium, it works well. But the problem is when your staffing changes, then the social media can get lost. So you really want to try to spread out your social media amongst the people in your organization and make sure that more people have buy-in to it, that more people understand what's going on with it and what your goals are. Because when I came on board in 2009, it took me a while to get engaged with the blog, Twitter account, and Facebook account. I had already had a lot of other things that I needed to learn for my job that were much more prominent, learning different subject areas that I'd never covered before. And so constantly during that time period, I was thinking about the blog and the Facebook account and how I wasn't posting much to it, and it really caused a lot of anxiety. My director says that she didn't feel any kind of concerned about it because it really wasn't our primary mode of communication. And you can see on this chart that I do even point out that during this time period, she was the one that was primarily posting. So during the summer of 2010, all this anxiety that this blog and these social media outlets caused me prompted me to try to work with other people in my library to come up with a more targeted plan. And so we outlined some general parameters about how frequently there should be, well, we analyzed our audience. We tried to come up with some content streams that we thought that people would want to be monitoring on our blog, things that would attract people to our blog and keep them as regular readers. And we also tried to expand the involvement of people who were contributing, so it wasn't all just in the hands of one or two people. And with this, we tried to create parameters about how many times people should be posting in each of these content areas. So we knew that other steps would need to be taken to make the blog more visible. But really, before we even started marketing the blog and trying to drive more people to it, we really wanted to build the content on the blog so that there was a reason for people to come. So that summer, we spent time just trying to come up with these theories. And so this chart here, you can see that once the strategic plan was implemented in the summer of 2010, that the number of posts that we were doing for each of the semesters, obviously in the summer it's going to be a little bit lower, but it definitely increased. So by fall 2010, we were up to 47 posts. This is like double or quadruple what had been happening before. And to be honest, the anxiety was gone because it wasn't just me being the one who was posting. We knew what kind of content needed to be going up there. We knew sort of when it was going, and it was just naturally developing itself. So at the end of fall 2010, we actually added an RSS feed to the library homepage. And so you can see we're only halfway through the semester right now, and we've already, this is the statistics that I created on Monday, we have already surpassed the number of posts that we created for last semester. So measuring the number of posts is not necessarily a success rate in terms of the number of people reading the blog, but it is showing you that with some proper management, you can get more people involved, you can create posts that are a little bit more interesting and robust without the pressure of feeling anxiety that you're not communicating enough with your audience. So let me show you just one more slide. This actually does show you how the visits to our blog have changed over the course of time. I didn't use the fall semester because for some reason our Halloween blog posts just get a weird reaction. People come to it that I don't think are actually really part of our community. They're just looking for some of the pictures that we used. But you can see that in spring 2009 and 2010 we were pretty much level at the same number of visits. But again, we are only halfway through the semester and we have more than doubled the number of people that are coming to our blog.
Okay, so now that you're hopefully all convinced about the fabulousness of setting a plan for your social media, let's just talk about some of the steps that you might want to undertake if you decide to undergo this process. So we're going to talk about, first of all, considering your audience. Second, setting content areas. 3, choosing a target audience, especially if you're in a larger library. How to divide and conquer the workload, and also information and some best practices on setting standards. So, Casey, I don't remember who was going to start the slide, so I'm just going to go ahead and launch into it. But the first step that we put up is consider your audience. So this is a very important step that I think a lot of times gets glossed over, especially in terms of social media, because we have a lot of assumptions, and we have a lot of great national data also that says, you know, these people are using social media and this is how they're using it. All the people in the world are on Facebook. And we see that and we say, okay, great, so that means we need to be on Facebook. And that is probably true, but I think that it's really important also to speak to people in your specific population, because Joan, I'm glad you got that. I was very excited about the Waldo reference. So it's really important to talk to the people at your library specifically and see what they want, because in many cases you'll find that what they ask for and the way they want to be contacted by you and interact with you is totally different from what they're finding in the national level. So it's really important to do some form of assessment, I think. Especially even if you don't have a lot of time. It doesn't need to be a super in-depth thing. You don't need to get, you know, LibQual or something really, really significant like that. I recommend focus groups. They can be really excellent to do, and you can bribe people with pizza or, you know, little prizes of some kind if you can get a little bit of money. Also, one of my favorite projects in terms of assessing what people wanted was I got a colleague of mine, and we got a book truck, and we got a basket full of candy bars, and we got a little sign, and we just grabbed people as they came up the stairs in our library, and we said, hey, do you mind talking with us for just a couple of minutes about how you'd like to get in touch with us and how you'd like to be communicated with? And we made sure to, of course, log what grade they were, what level they were, because these are both university colleges. Of course, if you're public, then you can just generally log your communities, or the high school students, people who are enrolled in college, you know, so forth and so on. So informal interviews can be really useful. Also surveys. You can do little surveys that are just 1 or 2 questions and post them on your library's homepage. So those can be really excellent in terms of soliciting feedback. And you also do want to look at that stuff that's national in nature, and also consider your census data, I suppose. That could be really useful to you in some ways in terms of determining who has computers in the home and all that sort of basic stuff. So this is a really important step. Casey, is there anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, Sarah. In terms of also considering the audience and how to reach out to them, I think it's also important that if you don't really have time to do these surveys, to go ahead and start analyzing your audience on your own in a very deliberate way. In a way, I feel like it's important to go ahead and develop some content to give people something to react to. So we didn't, when we started revising things at Agnes Scott, we didn't go ahead and do any kind of survey or do focus groups, and I'm okay with that because I feel like we're putting forth our vision of what we think we should be doing, and we will go back and do those kind of steps. So one of the things that I wanted to, I'm going to move into the next slide, Sarah, so if you have anything else, just let me know. Okay, cool. So part of this is, since we didn't use a formal survey method, we did ask ourselves some questions though. Like I said, I think we should be very deliberate about what we are putting up there, and that we should do some, don't just guess, but do an educated guess. And so these are 3 questions that we used when we were first trying to decide how to revise our content on the blog and develop our plan. And I think somebody had asked about this before, how did we analyze our audience? We pretty much just sat down and said, what do users of the library want to know? What kind of content does the library have to offer? And what does the library want to communicate? These are really different things. Like what the library wants to communicate, I want them to know about study tips and ways that we can help. I want them to know about the hours. I have a lot of things I want them to know. They don't always want to know them, but I have a lot of things that I want them to know. So I put those into a category. I also thought about things that we do have to offer that people don't necessarily always think of. So what's that kind of content that we should be putting out there? But the really key thing is, what do the users of the library want to know? They don't necessarily want, they may not be coming for the reasons that you think. So you want to put something fun in there for them. And so from this planning process, we came up with these content streams. There's 4 of them that we came up with. So general library news, books, film, news, research and technology, and teaching and technology. And honestly, each of these kind of target different audiences. The general library news, that focuses on everybody, every single user, anybody who wants to know about changes in hours, space, policy, etc. Books and film news, that's more for those people that are true library lovers and people who love reading books. So we're just recognizing the fact that people might see that librarians have something worthwhile to say about it, and so we're going to try to cover that content area. And then research and technology, that goes more into some of the things that we really do want to communicate ourselves, and we feel like people should know, and also things that we have to offer. So we keep up with a lot of technology trends, and ideally that's sort of the stuff that we could be putting onto the blog. How can they manage their research better? What are some databases that would be great for topics that they may be wanting to cover? And then finally, technology and teaching. Obviously that's being focused to a very direct audience, just our faculty. But again, we have things that we monitor in the library literature, so why shouldn't we share them with them? And this slide we just kind of put in there. This is my little library helper that I found a picture of. I like to call him Tweeting Timberland or something like that. But our little elf here has some content suggestions for you that are some things that you might think about doing as your content areas to flesh those out. Interviews with faculty and students, interviews with avid library users. These are some of the ways that you can try to get a more community feel to the content that you're putting out there.
I feel like I had something else I wanted to say about that slide, but it just leapt out of my mind. Oh, you know, I remembered what it was. I think that a lot of these suggestions, and the reason we wanted to put them, is because they really emphasize the concept of creating community, and that can be a really intimidating concept for a lot of people because you can it's difficult to know sometimes what exactly people want from you. So if you solicit this content in a sort of semi-formal way and say, hey, can I interview you and post this, then people have a vested interest because they're excited because you're talking to them about their research, and then they tell their friends, and then maybe their friends tell their other friends. So it really starts to build that community model and to show people that you're interacting with them in a meaningful way. So you're not just pushing content, you're also soliciting content. And then there's also space, of course, for news and stuff like that. Okay, so we talked a little bit before about assessing your audience on the whole. You also may want to, depending on the size of your library and depending on the year, of course, choose a particular target audience, because you have to set a target if you're going to hit it. And at Georgia State, we have so many students, and in 2007, just to give you a tiny bit of more brief background, we did a renovation of the library in 2006 to 2007. We renovated, and we made it largely an undergraduate space. So what happened to us was the undergraduates are very happy. They feel like they have lots of space and lots of things are happening for them. But our graduate students and our faculty members were largely disgruntled. And that was actually what a lot of our surveying and a lot of our interviewing and a lot of our, all of our basic patron feedback solicitation, that was what it showed us, was that the graduate students and the faculty felt disenfranchised and disconnected from the library. So what we decided to do when we set our strategy for the blog in 2009, and basically for the whole library actually in 2009, was to target faculty and graduate students. And we decided that we were going to post a certain number of blog posts that were specifically for them. And we set up a specific tagging system in the blog, which is, of course, a general best practice for blogging. And we made sure we tagged all the posts that were relevant to faculty and graduate students as faculty and graduate student. And then oftentimes it related to a specific discipline. And it was in that space that we did a lot of those interviews. And we also made a lot of effort to emphasize the publications and research and awards and grants of our faculty members and also of our really stellar grad students. So again, it was that concept of building community and showing those particular populations that they were valuable to us, and what it was that we could offer to them, and how we were going to engage with them.
Yeah, at Agnes Scott we also have actually chosen a target audience. So again, I can't emphasize enough that we're really focusing on building content for a particular audience and trying to attract them first, and then we'll move on. So there's 4 areas that I showed you previously that are the content streams that we're focusing on. The general library news one is an easy one to do. That's just kind of your basic getting started with blogging and social media, the types of information you should be pushing out there. And goes to the whole audience. But the second one, the books and news, is really where we decided to focus our attention, partially because it's real easy to get other people on board with trying to write for the blog in those areas. We really are focusing just on the audience that would be truly those library lover kind of people right now that are interested in reading our blog, mainly because they love books and film anyway. And then the other 2, I really do want to get to them, and we do post about them, but I haven't made a concrete effort to reach out to those communities yet, because I think that I don't want to be trying to attract those people to the blog yet until I feel like they have enough to come back to. So once we do work on that area a little bit more, I'll do a lot more marketing towards those audiences. So the next step in trying to get your social media, reanalyzing your approach to your social media, is to divide and conquer. No one person can develop all the content that's needed, and it can be a full-time job for just one person. Posting assignments should be divided up. Each individual should understand what they're expected to post and how frequently. And you can have more than one person working on a content area, but it's important to make sure that everyone knows what they're responsible for. So dividing it up also gives your social media a true institutional voice. Sarah, do you want to talk about what they did at Georgia State?
Yeah, sure, because I think it's a really important point. So here at State, what happened was when we instituted that plan in 2009 and we decided we were going to place the emphasis on creating more dynamic content on the homepage, which was why ultimately the blog ended up there on the homepage. The students said they wanted more dynamic content. So we put the blog front and center, and of course, we decided that if we were going to put it front and center and taking up so much real estate on our homepage, it needed to have really excellent content. So what happened was administration decided to make a mandate that not every librarian in the whole library, but a huge percentage of librarians in the library, public services, special collections, I think a couple of other departments, all had to do at least 4 blog posts per year. And I'm not going to lie to you, this was not a universally popular mandate. A lot of people felt a lot of trepidation, a lot of people had a lot of concern, and a lot of people commented, well, if the students aren't using the blog, then why would we want to put it on the home page, and why would we want to spend all this time on it? And the answer, of course, is that if you don't put any time into it, nobody's going to come. So somebody said you have to bake cookies and they'll come. I think it's the same concept. You have to make the cookies or build the sports arena or whatever before anybody's going to come and look at your page. They're not just hanging around dying to hear what the library has to say if you're not putting anything up. You really have to engage them. So we did decide to require everybody to do these posts. And the point I want to make about this also before we move along to the next thing is that eventually people really saw the merit in it and the amount of kvetching. And I kvetched a little bit too, so I'm not trying to put the blame on anybody else because it's intimidating at first. But on the whole, as time passed, people got so much more comfortable with it, and it's a part of our workflow. And in reality, only 4 posts a year per person is not that significant an amount of work. So you have to do one every few months, really. And it just doesn't take up that much time. So ultimately, I think, even though it wasn't wildly popular in the beginning, it was very successful.
Sorry, I've just now flip through too many of the slides. So, so if you're at a smaller library like Agnes Scott, then you're probably thinking, we don't have there's no way that we can get more people to divide this up and to get people to do more than what they're already doing. Because, as I mentioned before, we have tons of responsibilities here at Agnes Scott that could usually be 3 or 4 different other positions. But what you can do is you can start small. Don't fret too much, just start small, because it is actually kind of fun to do blogging. And you can maybe try to convince people that it is, the way that we did here. So what we did is we just asked for volunteers. Having the plan in place, knowing the types of content, those content streams, and being able to show those to individual staff members made it really easy for me to sell this idea of, hey, I think that you would be great at doing blog posts on monthly events that are happening related to books and film in Atlanta. And so you can try to instill this confidence in other people and get them on board to at least try it. So that's what we did, is we tried to go, for each of those content streams that we developed, we broke it out into smaller sub-series, individual series, and talk to individual people about, hey, would you like to be responsible for the staff picks? And that might be going to different departments and talking to them about books that they read. So there are things that you can do to make it seem exciting and try to get them started. So that's why summer is a great time for it. And so let me just show you, in addition to staff, if you can't get the staff on board, you can also work with students. I really think that our student assistants that are at the circulation desk and the reference desk, if you have them there, they're part of the library, and giving them a voice in the blog gives them a little bit of ownership. And also we have some just general student volunteers. So let me show you real quickly some of the things that we've pulled together from Dividing and Conquering. First, here's that monthly series from a staff member. She does it every month, and it's great to know that this series will come out at the very beginning of the month. So I know that at least this content's going to be there. And to be honest, I don't know if it's as popular as we thought it would be, but it's something that we're putting out there, and patrons know what to expect. Here are some of the posts from different students that we have. The student that's pictured here, she actually works at our circulation desk. The other ones are from students that are just volunteers. So I sent them out some guidelines, and they have been reviewing our DVD collection, which is great. And then here's this, I have a student assistant that works with me at the reference desk, and I've given her an hour of her work study time to go out every week and interview a faculty member on campus about what they like to read for fun. And it's been one of the best series ever. This thing gets the most hits because it's about the community and people really relate to it. So, and she's a wonderful writer. So it's been great having this added in there. And all of this has taken the load off my back. And I think Ginger mentioned whether blog posts are scheduled. We'll mention that a little bit later, but a lot of these, they'll submit their work to me, and I'll go ahead and pre-schedule it. So it may not come out for a month, but I'll schedule it during the time during the next month, because usually these come out on Tuesdays and Mondays.
So I just wanted to show you one example of a content area from our blog post and point out the fact that public services, traditionally we think of public services as being responsible for a lot of this, but our special collections department actually makes the most popular blog posts in the whole library, I think. They actually made a game out of it, where they post unidentified pictures, and they post one every week, and people have to come in and attempt to identify the unidentified pictures, and people really get into it. And I wanted to point that out because I think it's a really fabulous way, again, to create the community, to get people involved, and to get people coming back every week. I think that's the most important part, is people are coming back, they're looking at the blog, and they're getting excited about it almost like it's a game. And of course, not everybody has got a special collections or an archives, but I'm sure you could come up with something very similar to this, and this has just been wildly popular. Quality control. I think I was doing this too, Casey. I'm going to go ahead and start. My notes are incomplete on who's starting the slides. So quality control is another thing that we wanted to launch into a little bit. Voice is something that's a big concern, and somebody asked about whether Casey moderates comments from or posts from the students. The answer is she does. She reads over them and makes sure they're okay. At Georgia State, we don't have any moderators before the blogs go up, but we do have a different person who's set each week who just keeps an eye on the blog posts as they go up. They approve comments as they come in, and they make sure that all the links are going to the right places and that nothing weird is happening with formatting or anything like that. So somebody can go in and tweak the posts, and that person, that is their job for that 2-week period, is that's part of what they're expected to do every single day, is watch the blog. And we do have people separately assigned to watch the Facebook and the Twitter account. So we have people set up for each of those things. So setting up guidelines for quality control can be very important. And I like to think of them at our school as being sort of business casual. You want to have a personal voice and a personal touch. You don't want it to be too stuffy, but then again, you don't want it to become inappropriate for the workplace.
Yeah, the only thing that we don't have a lot of guidelines in place. I do have a set of guidelines that I sent to the student volunteers, because more for them, again, to feel like they understood what was expected. I mean, we never grow out of what does the teacher want kind of syndrome. So I gave them some guidelines as to how to organize their blog, how to submit it, and things, their blog posts, and how to submit it. But really, I don't care for the most part. I thought I double check it with my director sometimes, that the tones are fine, but one of those students posted, her blog post included the phrase, "This movie kicks butt," and I was really kind of concerned about that at first. I double checked it with our director, but she liked it. She thought it still represented the student voice. So I tend not to edit too much. The only 2 guidelines that we really have in place right now is that I don't want to have any kind of politically biased language. So anything that's going to alienate somebody else, then that's something that we will definitely strip out. So for instance, there was a post that I did on the federal deficit, and in it the links were for news sources that were from conservative and liberal publications. So it's really important to make sure that's in place. And then the other thing is, especially with these students that are doing these reviews of our movies, I don't really want to be telling people that we bought something that was bad. So I would love to have them share their true opinion about and give a negative review, but at the same time, there's so many other things that we do have that are good that we'd rather keep it positive. So that's really the only guidelines that we have right now, but we will, as our blog progresses, we'll become more structured with it.
You guys, I was going to spend some time talking about the specifics of our blog guidelines, but I actually think we're running too low on time, and I want to skip past this to the actual meat of our conclusion. But if anybody's interested in seeing our specific guidelines, we do have a document that has been distributed to everybody who does blog posts, and there was training in it. So I'm gonna just cut past that, but we can come back to it later. Oops. Oh, now I'm skipping way too far. Casey and I are both trying to drive at the same time. Casey, I'll click. There we go. So assessing your success, I know we talked a little bit about assessment in the beginning and the importance of analyzing your audience. It's important to keep up a cycle of assessment, and I talked a little bit about the Google Analytics in the beginning. It's important to review your data. It's important to ask students as you start doing more and more postings and making more and more effort if they have noticed it and if they like it and what they like. And also take a look at what information is what they call sticky, so stuff that people are reposting, stuff that they're retweeting, stuff that's showing up on repeated people's Facebook pages, it's getting a lot of thumbs up signs, all that sort of good stuff is really important.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add to this. Within the blog software itself, you can actually look at the statistics for individual posts, and that's something that I found to be helpful for understanding the content that is getting more well received. So that's one thing to look at too, and make revisions based off of that. We have an end of the year survey that we do that mentions the blog, and so it was in it last year, and people didn't know anything about the blog. So I'm looking forward to it this year. But we probably will institute more formal assessments later.
Okay, so we're just going to breeze through these last few slides and then we will be finished. We just wanted to sort of give an overview of best practices. The first thing that I think is probably most important is be honest about your time and abilities when you're setting up your plan, if you decide to set one up, which I hope you will. Don't feel like you have to do everything at once, and don't feel bad if you can't maintain a presence on every single platform. That's why it's so important to determine which one is best for you and your particular situation and your particular audience. Be human. This is something I talked about a little bit earlier. Don't feel like you have to be super robot professional all the time. And Karen, this is your cue. I asked Karen to pull for me really quickly the Twitter feed for JetBlue and also for Home Depot, because they both do a really great job of being human. And if you look at the Home Depot Twitter feed, you'll see that they actually have a little caret, and then it says which person individually has actually responded to the post. So it's just a really great way of showing your listeners and your followers that your company is, of course, comprised of a number of humans. Give the process time. That's another really important thing. This isn't going to happen overnight for you, so don't feel bad if a few months pass and you're still not getting a lot of traction, as Buffy would say. So to continue, set metrics for your success. Again, something we touched on a little bit already. It's really important to set that target so that you'll know that you're hitting it. So are you aiming for a certain number of friends or followers? Are you aiming for a certain number of hits on your site? Are you aiming for a certain number of retweets or a certain number of posts per month? All those things, while they may not be especially useful individually, can come together to give you the best possible picture of how your social media is being received. So there are a lot of different ways to pull that data together and give yourself a really cohesive picture of what's happening. Assign responsibility. We talked about that, the importance of having touch people for various things so that somebody's got their eye on the ball. Creating community, and don't be shy about trying different things and doing pilot testing. Even if your audience hasn't indicated that they want something, they may not know that they want it yet. So just because something's not on your plan doesn't mean you shouldn't give it a shot and see how it goes. And finally, my Blue Oyster Cult reference, which hopefully somebody besides me will get, and we can say more cowbell and etc. Don't feel like if your projects fail that you're a failure, because it's going to happen. Some things won't ever get traction, and that's just sort of the way it is. But you don't want to be dragging the albatross corpse of your programs along forever. If you find that it's not working, either adjust your approach to it, or eventually just stop doing it. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think both of our libraries are really excellent examples of the importance of saying, listen, this just maybe isn't for us right now. We can try it again in a couple of years, but at this point in time, it's not really working.
And in this presentation, we focused mainly on the idea of developing a strategy that will serve as a core foundation for your outreach in social media. We hope that we've been cheerleaders for you, that if you have a blog or any kind of social media already, and that you'll take a look at it and think about ways that you can really maximize its value. But there's a couple other things that we wanted to focus on that were outside of strategy. Sarah mentioned plan to reuse content when you can. At Georgia State and at Agnes Scott, the content that we post to our blogs automatically update to our other social media. So there's tools like networked blogs and RSS graffiti that will ensure that content that you place in one area will post to another. Also, Ginger had asked about posting schedules. Posts don't have to be drafted right and then posted right away. When you write a blog post, for instance, you can schedule to have it post months away. At Agnes Scott, I have a series of posts that market databases relevant to a particular theme, like Women's History Month, that appear every 2 weeks on Wednesday. All of these posts were written during winter break, and having them scheduled throughout the semester has helped me feel sure that the content would be continually posted, even during busy instruction times, when I knew I wouldn't be able to draft something. So you can bet that this summer, when it's less busy, I'm going to be cracking the whip on everyone here in the library to get them to write something so that when I'm teaching the 30 to 40 classes in the fall, that we don't have to worry about this. And then next, plan to create special content for your feed. Right now, Agnes Scott is at the stage of just creating core streams of content to entice our users. We're relying heavily on the feeds from our blog to our Facebook account. But the best practice is to make sure that each platform that you're using, Twitter, a blog, Facebook, that each of them offers a little bit of unique content to your users, because you might have people following you in all places. So it's okay to have similar content, but make sure that there are some differences, and unfortunately we don't do that right now, but we will. And finally, make a plan for comment editing. Comments are a tricky issue. You want to create this sense of community, so it's an ideal way to create that community by letting comments be posted. But what do you do if they post something that's profane or confrontational? At places like Agnes Scott, it's easy for us to decide what to delete and to edit. But at public institutions, there can be liability issues. So I'm going to let Sarah talk about that real quickly, and then we'll close.
Yeah, we're at time, so I'll just say that actually a colleague and I, Brian Coy, did a study on this. It was published in Reference and User Services Quarterly last year, and it was all about specifically making a plan for social media comment editing. And it was really important because we found that a lot of libraries were actually violating the First Amendment with their comment editing plans. So it was called Protection, Not Barriers. And we will actually send out the URL to it if people are interested, so you can take a look at that. And with that, our final slide. We're a bit over now, so I don't think we really have time for questions here. However, if anybody wants to post questions in this window, please do. Okay, Adrienne, I'll go ahead and send it out. So go ahead and post your questions here, also with your email, and we will get back with you. Or you are also welcome to email either one of us. We really should have put our emails on this slide. I will add them right now. And that's all. Thanks very much, and please take a break.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Guys, we'll send the emails out for Sarah and Casey, so you can get in touch with them and ask them some more questions. We just wanted to take a second to remind everybody that the Carterette series webinars have been renamed in honor of one of our founding members, Pat Carterette, who passed away in January of 2011. She was an incredible librarian and a great human being, and we miss her very much. So we just wanted to take a second to honor her. And thank you all so much for your attendance today. We hope you enjoyed this session as much as we did. On the closing slide, you'll see the URLs for the assessment for today's webinars and the certificate request for the webinar that you've just attended. So we hope that you'll take the time to complete the assessment, because your feedback is very important to us. And if you have an idea for a topic or a presenter for future webinars, let us know. All of our email addresses are on the bottom of the slide there. We're going to take a little break now, and we'll return to this room at 11:15 for Branding and Influence, establishing your digital identity and reputation, presented by Robin Fay. And I'm sure she'll speak much better than I do. So thank you all so much, and enjoy your break.